Greetings. Now we're going to talk about impact assessment in more detail. Let's just take some time now to look at what are some of the things that you try to estimate as best you can when you do an impact analysis. And as you saw in our last discussion, people power is important. You call it grassroots activity if you want, because governments and others, corporations, will pay attention to you if you're in a group, of course, as you know, more than if you're a singular person. Some of the issues you look at involve simple things like siting. You may remember when we talked about the tour down the river, the lady who sold her farm to the utility company who wanted to build a nuclear power plant was discussing, and the man said, well, our reports that we have will show that it's okay to site our nuclear plant here. They have, in the case of nuclear power, there's a two-step licensing process. One is you get a license to site the plant, build it there, then you get a license to operate it. It's a two-step process, and it involves a public hearing in both cases. It's under administrative law. Now, there's building codes and siting requirements for factories, for homes, for businesses and stores and whatever. So whatever you're going to build a facility or do anything, you have to make sure that what you're doing is allowable in the region or area or place you're going to do it. And so the siting is one thing to look at, and it's pretty quantitative or technical, you might say, in the sense that you have a law to follow that says you can do it if you meet these requirements or you can't. And it's important to know that. As an example, let's say that you're in a city and you have a building and you put solar arrays all around the building so that you can supplement your electric power in a renewable way. And they're doing fine, and the sunshine's shining, you're getting electricity, and some guy decides to build a building nearby, and that building casts a shadow on your building and your solar array after he builds it. Well, hey, you're infringing on my ability to produce electricity. And we're going to have a discussion about that. I don't care if you build your building, but I don't want you doing it in such a fashion because I have solar rights. I have right to the access of that sunshine. So that's the kind of thing you start thinking about. What about the labor requirements? You know, what kind of people are going to move in as a consequence of what you're going to do? You know, if it's fracking is a good example. You know, people say, oh, hey, I think it's wonderful. I'll be able to make some money. The people came in, got the mineral rights for the minerals of my farm here, say, and then suddenly in comes the labor, in comes the equipment, in comes the water demands, in comes pollutants, and you think, whoa, I didn't think I was going to get all that because you hadn't done a real assessment as to what's going on. On TV, it's wonderful. The advertisements, you know, we're giving jobs, we're doing all this kind of stuff. They don't talk about that. They don't talk about the woman who's got a picture of her getting a glass of water and there's flames coming out of her faucet because some gas, as a result of fracking, got in the water table and is percolating its way up through the water stream. But anyway, that's exceedingly rare but terribly effective. So what kind of labor is coming and what kind of laws exist? What about a fiscal analysis? You need to have some idea, what's the capital expenditures? What are the costs going to be? What's the tax rate going to be? You know, you have to incorporate all that when you do that. And so you're making a design of something, but you don't make it. And then you're saying, let's assume that design is real. And then if it's real, then these are the things that we have to do. This is the kind of infrastructure I need. Roads, sewage, water, electricity, waste disposal, whatever the case may be. Special kind of truck's going to have to come in and pick my wastewater out because it's too dangerous to put in the sewer system. and it has to be dealt with elsewhere? Do I want trucks carrying that stuff that could have an accident and spill it downtown or in my neighborhood, or that stuff could get in the aquifer, my water supply? Those kinds of things have to be thought about relative to the physical, chemical, and energy requirements. Are my electric bills going to go up? What about the tax base and so on and so forth? I'm going to be here, but to get me here so there'll be jobs, I'm going to get a tax abatement. Well, that's good for me and my company, but what about the people in the community? Is that going to be good for them or not? So what kind of transportation needs are there? Are there going to be trucks rumbling down the side streets and the major roads through town? What's going to happen? Are we going to have more trains? Whatever. Or more barging if I live along the river? What's going to happen? Or will there be less barging? Will there be less traffic? Will the local economy suffer because of the fact that things will be changing? And we've already talked about the impact of the transport of the pollutants and the handling of the waste. How's that going to take place? And what, if any, health effects will there be? So what are we saying? You got to look at the laws and regulations about what you can put and can't put in a particular area, the kind of services that are going to be supplied, the kind of fiscal money flows that are going to be taking place, whether it's taxes to the community, income to people who live in the community or commute, and the costs, the infrastructure costs that might occur to the people that live in the community because they may have to maintain roads, supply water and sewage and waste disposal capabilities. And if any emissions are given, whatever kind, what health effects might there be? And that's very important. And finally, does it meet environmental regulations? So you see, all these things are kind of quantitative. You can model this sort of stuff. And so you have a virtual facility, and you're looking at all the things that could happen. And you could even have what you call a design-based accident analysis, where you assume you're dealing with hazardous material here or high-pressure material, and there's explosion. What could cause that explosion? What's the probability? It's kind of a risk analysis. What could cause that explosion? Have you got enough safety equipment in there? And if there was an explosion, how would that impact our community? If you're at a community and all of a sudden a bunch of people want to come in and put in a whole bunch of gasoline storage tanks, well, would you think twice about that? Or would you say, oh, well, as long as I don't look in that direction to see those ugly things, I'll just look someplace else. Otherwise, we're happy there for the taxes. I don't know. People's opinions vary. But you got to think about all that stuff. But so with this virtual facility, you can talk about all the virtual consequences and even a design basis accident analysis. And if you are familiar with the Code of Federal Regulations, and Title 40 happens to be the environment, you have access to information that says, if you're going to do this, these are the things you better think about. And you may even require that hypothetical facility have associated with it a full-blown environmental impact statement where they look at a lot of these issues more from the standpoint of what happens with material coming in, going out, pollutant transport and impact and the like, as contrasted to labor force and siting and economy and so on. So you have a tremendous list of things to perform, and this is a sampling. It's not the only list. This is a sampling to get you thinking about, well, if I want to do some analysis, what are some of the things I should think about? Well, first thing I need to do is let's produce a scenario that's going to say, we think there's going to be this kind of a facility at this particular location. If it were there, what will happen? Okay, that's it. And then use the tools, Get people that are expert in the area, whatever the case may be, and you might even be able to do a lot of it with volunteers. Sit down and begin to do that analysis. So you have something to say other than, well, I don't like it, or I like it because I feel like, because that isn't going to get you anywhere. If you do a good impact assessment and you can say, these are some numbers, these are some conflicts I see between laws and regulations of what this virtual plant's going to do, you have a point to argue. You understand better, have a better chance to view what could be the reality in the future. And it isn't just I feel that. That comes later in a social impact assessment, frankly. But it allows you to move forward in this business of interacting with technology and culture in a more intelligent and realistic fashion. And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? We want to be as realistic as we can. So please take the business of impact assessment seriously. And so when we get together next week, we'll start out by looking at the Ohio River Basin study and what kind of reality that projected in the development of electric energy facilities in the Ohio River Basin, so that everybody involved, utilities, citizens, you name it, were working on a more level playing field and coming to some kind of consensus.